Introduction demo to our NBA lineup optimizer powered by Daily Fantasy Cafe. One of the most common questions users ask us is, why should I pay for your optimizer versus the other tools? To put it simply, no other tool can help you like our optimizer can. Our optimizer has every feature you ever dream of needing. Starting with the top line, you'll select the site you'd like to play on, DraftKings, FanDuel, or Yahoo. Then you select the slate. And the players in the table below are changed based on the slate selected above. The optimizer settings, it's actually a settings profile of the it's a snapshot of the tool. So if you're going around, you're locking players, changing projections, and maybe you're using some advanced options, you add a projection model in, and you wanted to save this snapshot of the tool, you could even generate lineups, save a lineup. Then you could save this snapshot setting, and you can name this. And you can say it's my DK, Cash, NBA, whatever you like. One lock. Click OK, and that settings profile is saved there, and you can use that throughout the day. So this can save a ton of time. You can go through, create your different profiles you like, different strategies. Then you can go back to the default, start over. You can also save over. Let's say you went back to that profile and you wanted to change something up. Maybe you wanted to turn on global exposure. You could save it and override it. You can delete it, and then you can add a new setting profile as well. So this alone can save you tons of time, well worth the product. In order to see advanced options, you click this hide show button and you'll see the advanced options pop down. They can be different on each tab, so just get familiar with the tool. On the players tab is where you'll spend most of your time, as well as projections and then generated lineups. But let's run through each tab. So the projections tab, you'll see you have some projections options, and you also see a date and time when the projections were last updated. So if you're behind this time, you may not have caught up to the projections. So what you should do is reset projections, and then that will catch you up to the latest projections, because things get updated with injuries, with whether a player is playing, a depth chart change, especially in NBA, minutes are so critical. If a player is not playing and someone else steps up, those minutes are going to skyrocket and the projection is going to change. So make sure you stay on top of being current with the projections. You can upload your own projections easily. We give you player files each day. You can name them, so you can upload multiple player projections. You can do the same with minutes. The way we run our projections is that we come up with a fantasy point per minute and then estimate minutes. Those fantasy points per minutes are based on a number of factors, usage and so forth, opponent allowed, fantasy points allowed. So a number of factors go into the projections, and then you can update your minutes and projections manually as well as upload. So if you go down below in the projections tab, you'll see you can upload a player's minutes. And if I change this player's minutes to 35 because he's stepping in or something like that, and you like the way he looks, you just update the minutes, and we'll go find him, and he will be now 34 points. So when you see a green highlight around a cell or a red and you hover over, that's the difference that you've manually changed a projection. So if Kid Gilchrist is 31.5 and I change him to 29, click return, you'll see that cell will turn red, and if I hover over it, that'll be the difference of the projection made. So that helps you stay on top of how much you've changed in terms of our baseline cash game projection and the others that are available. You have GPP, last 5, last 10, and once you upload your own projections, the names will display in this dropdown, which you can select on the various tabs. Also, when you upload your own projections, you'll see the new columns display on the projections tab, so you can see them all at once. When you do select a projection source, the projection column will update with that source. Okay, so next we have some projection models, various built-in models we've built that are some of the more popular elements that people like to test. Vegas total, if you click on a projection model, you can click on one or more. The projections will change based on that game, based on this element. So if your team has a high Vegas total, they'll likely get a bump in projection, low Vegas total, and they may drop. DVP, defense versus position, this is based on fantasy points allowed per position. Ceiling, obviously the ceiling of a player over a certain number of games. In this case, we take the last 10, so we take out some outliers, we run our little ceiling formula, and this will change players. So if you really want to go for high ceiling players, you can click that in. If you're doing a GPP play, consistency, similar idea with consistency in hitting their value over the last 10 games. Game theory, it's our own little formula that looks at Vegas and how we feel the game flow will be. If it's a fast-paced game, we feel like people are going to be running and shooting, then your projections may go up. Usage rate, we get into minutes. And then on your filters, you have team totals, which will filter the table below. So if you selected 100 points, all players in games under 100 points would not display. Same idea with salary, projection, points per 1K, minutes, floor, ceiling, consistency, and usage. For our options, you can select whether you only want a certain number of players per team. If you turn on exposure, that makes this exposure column come to life. You can then adjust exposure. We have one of the most advanced exposure formulas in the industry. So what you can do is, if you have a lock on and exposure is turned on, exposure will turn to 0. And whatever value you add with a lock, this becomes an absolute lock. So if I lock with 50% exposure and run 10 lineups, and I click generate lineups, Aaron Brooks will be in 50% of the lineups. So if I go down and look for Brooks, you'll see he's locked in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you'll see his 50% here. So a lock with exposure means the player's locked in absolutely. Exposure without a lock means it's a suggested exposure for the optimizer. So what I'm telling the optimizer here is that you can put in Beno, however you say that name, 50% of the time, or you may not, but you may not go over 50%. So what you're doing, it's kind of like a ceiling for exposure, but you're not guaranteeing any exposure. So super advanced, you can play around with that. Most optimizers can't handle that logic. We also have global exposure. If you're really wanting to get into tournaments and you want to vary up your lineups a lot, this is a great way to do it. It's really easy. You turn on global exposure, and every player will get this exposure. So you will not get players more than 25% or 50%. So you know you'll get a high diversity. You can turn on and off our color badges in our table, and then you can also turn on the tips, which tips will tell you what each element in the advanced options. If you just hover over, it'll give you an explanation of exposure and the rest of them. So you can turn this off. Sometimes it gets annoying after a while if you already understand what the tool is about. Okay, so then we've got the Games tab, which gives you each game, gives you some important Vegas information and theory. From the Games tab, you can actually exclude entire players from an entire team. You can also bulk update players from a team, and bulk update is this heart. And what this heart does is it sends all the players into the bulk update of above, and you can lock all players at once. You can exclude all players. You can change all the players' projections up or down. You can adjust exposure on players. So if I wanted to set all Pistons players to 50%, you can do so, and then all these players will now be set at 50%. So it saves you a ton of time. You can do the same from the Players tab. You can send players to the bulk update by clicking the heart, and you can take them away by clicking the heart again. We have different position tabs here, and if there are more than 25 players in position, you'll see various pages here that you can click back and forth. You can also search by player name or team abbreviation if you want to do that. And then we have our reset options, which if you get into a bind and you can't generate lineups because you've got too specific of settings or whatever you've done in projections, you want to reset them, you can reset individual elements, and you can also reset all. If you get to the tool to a really funky place and can't do anything, follow the steps here that will help you with common issues. And a last chance effort, you nuke the tool, and what that does is it clears all your cache within this tool, and so it'll bring you back to ground zero. So you'll definitely be able to run lineups after you nuke the tool, but you lose all your safe settings when you do that, so use that as a last resort. Okay, going through some of the columns, we've got name, we've got a little red injury icon here that'll tell you what their injury status is. We've got position. You can sort by each column. salary, exposure, points per 1K. Cafe value, which is our value formula, takes into consideration the salary cap, the players in the roster, their salary, and so forth. We've got your projection, teams, spread, total, over, under, game theory, defense versus position, fantasy points per game allowed per position, minutes, usage rate, fantasy points per minute, field goal percentage, floor last 10, ceiling last 10, and consistency, which, as I said, is over the last 10 games in them hitting value. So everything's sortable. Our color codes are, we have green, yellow, red for the best to worst plays. We have 3 different colors within each color. So you have dark green, medium, and low, and a lighter shade of green. And that just signifies how solid we think the plays are. All your excludes will be in here. And as you come into the tool, you'll see that there will be automatically be a number of excludes. And that's because if you look in the injuries tab, we exclude players that are out automatically. And so you can change that by clicking in these boxes, and that will take away the excludes if you wish. You can also click another injury status to exclude those players as well. You can search the exclude box, you can reset excludes, and so forth. Same thing with the locks. You can see this is the number of players in the locks and also their salary, so you can keep track of that. If I were to lock a number of players, you'll see that number change, and you'll also see that value change. Okay, so let's play around and let's generate some lineups. I'm going to exclude all these Pistons here, and I'm going to generate lineups, which you can do from any tab. Here's where you select the number of lineups you want to generate. So I'm going to generate 10 lineups and show you what you can do from the generate lineup screen. As the optimizer is thinking, you'll see the buttons show that progress bar. Let me show it to you again. And once it's done, it'll take you right to that tab. These tabs you can name. So you can click within the tab, just double click, and then you can name these. If you wanted to save them or come back to them or what have you, you can do whatever you want. You can name them. You can also delete them by clicking that X. We allow up to 100 lineups per tab and 5 tabs at a time. So if you were to generate 6 tabs, the first tab generated would get pushed out. So make sure you save your lineups as you go along. You download them if you're generating more than 5 tabs. As you can see with that 6th lineup, it'll push the other one down there. So you can generate up to 100 lineups at a time, 500 lineups total, and then you can keep going and generate as many as you like. Under each tab, you'll see the various slates, if there are a number of slates. So you can look at your lineups based on slate. Down here, if you click this Preview Projections button, you can see the various projections for all the projection sources. That saves a ton of time. You can see the name of the lineup, which you can also double click in and save that. You can see the number of points that this lineup is projected and the percentage optimized. You can preview projections. You can save a lineup, which it'll turn green, and you'll see up here in your Save Lineups tab. You can see all the lineups that you've saved. You can also download a lineup to CSV directly from the screen, and you can upload these directly to DraftKings or FanDuel. So that saves you a ton of time as well. You'll see the used salary and the remaining salary, and then we have some various positions and columns that you can also sort here. One feature that very few optimizers have is a swap. So you can actually swap players of equal or less salary, and you can see their projection in here. So if you really don't like, and if you want to click out, you can actually search here. You can search within the field, and if you really don't like our options or you don't want to swap, you just click this X to go back to the player. But this is a quick way to modify your lineups and get to the lineup you like. You can scroll down and see the other lineups as well. So we've created this page where you can edit all your lineups. You can swap out players, you can lock, you can change projection models, you can change projection sources. So once you get your tool to a nice place, you can do everything you want from the screen. And another way to modify players from the screen is click this Players Used button. This will pop up all the players used, how many lineups you built, the exposure percentage, their projection, the exposure number. You can search by player name or abbreviation. You can reset. And so you can do everything you need in here, and then you can scroll down and generate lineups from this box as well. So You don't have to go back and forth between tabs. You can save all your lineups at once, and you can download all your lineups as well. And you can always go to your Saved Lineups tab as you're working and mess around with the various lineups here. So we hope you've been convinced. It's well worth your money. It'll save you tons of time. It'll help you find that winning strategy. There's a whole lot of fun to be had in here, and it's gonna really help you build winning lineups. And that's the name of the game here. This optimizer is not a golden ticket with projections. You really need to do your own work. We do have, quality projections that we worked on over the past years. We feel like we have a great formula. We've got some guys that are top accuracy experts. But the fact of the matter is, there's so many optimizers out there. You don't want to just use the optimal lineups. You want to come up with your winning strategy. You want to play around with the projection models. You want to play around with your own strategies. You want to swap players in and out. Come up with a formula that works for you. In terms of the cost, it's worth it in time alone. Don't play without it and start winning more. Wish you the best.